You thought these were just messy breakups. You thought this was just another season of tears, visa fights, and dramatic walk-offs. But what if I told you some of the most explosive splits in the 90-day universe weren't just about love falling apart? They were about secrets that were never supposed to come out. What if the real story wasn't what we saw on TLC, but what was happening behind the cameras, in group chats, in leaked messages, in screaming matches that never aired? Because once you start peeling back the layers of these so-called romantic failures, you realize something darker was brewing the entire time. And today, we're talking about the most explosive breakups that didn't just end relationships. They detonated reputations. Let's start with the breakup that looked like a slow burn, but was actually a ticking time bomb from day one. On screen, they played the classic 90-day formula: cultural clashes, family disapproval, awkward dinners, tearful confessions. But what we weren't seeing was the control, the subtle manipulation, the way one partner constantly shifted the narrative to look like the victim, while quietly isolating the other from friends and support. It wasn't just disagreements, it was emotional chess. And when that final fight happened, when the yelling turned nuclear and the cameras caught those stunned faces, fans thought it was spontaneous. It wasn't. Insiders later revealed that tension had been escalating for weeks off camera. Financial disputes, suspicion over hidden social media accounts, whispered accusations about using someone for a green card. If you've ever rewatched that breakup scene and felt like something wasn't adding up, trust your instincts. Because the meltdown we saw? That was just the explosion after months of gasoline being poured behind the scenes. And if you're already feeling the chaos building, go ahead and mentally buckle up because this gets so much worse. Now let's talk about the couple everyone swore would prove the haters wrong. You know the ones. The age gap critics, the cultural skeptics, the family members practically begging them to reconsider. On camera, they doubled down. They performed unity. They fought the world together. But here's what no one expected: the betrayal didn't come from the obvious place. It wasn't cheating, at least not in the traditional sense. It was money, secret loans, hidden transfers, promises made to family overseas that the American partner never knew about. When bank statements surfaced, when questions turned into interrogations, the trust didn't just crack, it shattered. And suddenly the narrative flipped. The underdog wasn't so innocent. The supportive partner wasn't so supportive. And the breakup? It wasn't just tears. It was rage, public accusations. Social media lives exposing private arguments. One of them even hinted that producers protected the other with a soft edit. Imagine realizing the version of love you defended online was curated television, while the real relationship was crumbling in real time. If you've ever felt fooled by a reality TV redemption arc, just know you were not alone in this one. And just when viewers thought they'd seen the worst, there was the breakup that involved family interference so intense it felt like a Greek tragedy. Mothers screaming, siblings issuing ultimatums, cultural expectations colliding like freight trains. But here's the thing: it wasn't just overbearing relatives. It was loyalty tests. One partner was forced to choose between tradition and romance, and every choice felt like betrayal to someone. The cameras captured tears, yes, but they couldn't capture the private phone calls at 2 a.m., the threats of financial withdrawal, the emotional guilt spirals. And when that final argument erupted, the one where voices cracked and accusations flew, fans split into teams overnight. But what leaked weeks later changed everything. A voice memo. A heated exchange where one partner admitted they never planned to stay forever. That single sentence reframed the entire relationship. Was this love or strategy? And if you're sitting there thinking, wait, how did I miss that? You didn't. You were shown what they wanted you to see. Then came the breakup that truly detonated the fandom. The couple that thrived on chaos. The ones who fought like it was foreplay. Everyone assumed they'd break up dramatically and reunite just as fast. That was their pattern. But this time was different. This time, the fight exposed something deeper: resentment that had calcified into contempt. Words were said that couldn't be unsaid. Accusations about fame chasing. Claims that one partner only stayed for brand deals and Instagram growth. And when the split went public, both sides started leaking receipts, screenshots, partial demiss, selective truths. Fans were forced to play detective. Who edited what? Who cropped which message? The breakup became less about heartbreak and more about reputation warfare. And if you've ever screamed at your screen during one of these tell-all episodes, feeling like the real story was still hidden, you already understand the frustration that fueled this fallout. Because the truth was layered, messy, and deeply inconvenient for both sides. Now here's where everything flips. Right in the middle of what we thought was just another messy 90-day breakup, a former friend stepped forward. Not a cast member, not a family member. A friend who had been present during filming, and they dropped a truth bomb that sent shockwaves through the fandom. According to this insider, one of the most heartbroken cast members had already lined up another partner. Before the televised breakup even aired, timeline receipts started circulating, photos from months prior, comments that suddenly looked suspicious in hindsight. Was the devastation real? Or was it PR strategy? And this is the moment where the entire narrative shifts. Because if one breakup was partially staged for sympathy, what else have we misunderstood? Were tears genuine? Were reconciliations scripted? If this is blowing your mind, pause for a second and really think about how many storylines we've taken at face value. Because once you start questioning one, you start questioning all of them. As the dust settled, the emotional manipulation became impossible to ignore. Gaslighting accusations surfaced. One partner claiming they were pressured to play the villain for ratings. Another alleging they were emotionally isolated to maintain control. These weren't just romantic splits anymore. These were power struggles wrapped in romance packaging. And the most explosive part? Some of these exes still had contractual obligations tying them together, long after they publicly declared themselves done. Imagine breaking up with someone, but still having to film confessionals about them. Imagine trying to move on while producers ask you to relive the worst moments of your relationship on camera. That tension? It seeps into everything, and just when fans thought the chaos had peaked, another shockwave hit. A surprise reconciliation tease, a flirty comment, a suspicious joint appearance. Were they getting back together? Or was this another attention cycle? The audience felt whiplash. Because in the world of 90-Day Fiancé, closure is rare. Drama sells. And sometimes the breakup is just the beginning of a new storyline. If you've made it this far into this emotional roller coaster, you already know this universe doesn't reward simplicity. It thrives on tension. But here's the cliffhanger no one is ready for. Multiple former cast members have hinted that one of the most explosive breakups wasn't even about love, money, or family. It was about a secret contract clause that forced them to stay together longer than they wanted. And if that's true, if even one of these relationships was prolonged for storyline purposes, then how many tears were strategic? How many fights were amplified? How many shocking splits were timed for maximum ratings impact? Because the more we dig, the more it feels like we're not just watching relationships implode. We're watching narratives being engineered. And if that doesn't completely change the way you see these breakups, I don't know what will you thought that was the explosion. No, that was just the smoke clearing before the real firestorm began. Because once fans started digging deeper into the aftermath of these breakups, the narrative didn't just shift, it fractured. And what came out of those cracks? Allegations that make the original fights look like child's play. Let's talk about what happens after the cameras stop rolling. That eerie silence. That suspicious calm. That moment when one partner posts a cryptic quote about healing, and the other suddenly deletes every shared photo like the relationship never existed. That's not just heartbreak, that's strategy. Because in the 90-Day universe, timing is everything. One cast member announced their breakup mere hours before a tell-all trailer dropped. Coincidence? Or damage control? And then came the interviews, carefully worded, emotionally charged, but just vague enough to avoid breaking contracts. You could practically see the restraint in their eyes. They wanted to say more. They wanted to scream the truth. But NDA letters are louder than rage, and here's where it gets uncomfortable. One of the most wronged partners, the one fans rallied behind, the one who cried on camera and claimed betrayal, was allegedly orchestrating private smear campaigns behind the scenes. According to multiple sources close to production, they were feeding selective stories to bloggers, hoping to control the public perception before their ex could speak. Imagine being heartbroken and also calculating headlines at the same time. It's cold, it's messy, and it completely reframes who the real victim might be. If you're sitting there thinking, wait, are we rooting for the wrong person? That's exactly the feeling insiders say production was battling too. Then there's the breakup that spiraled into legal territory. What started as shouting matches turned into threats of lawsuits, defamation claims, accusations that private conversations were secretly recorded. Suddenly, it wasn't just reality TV drama, it was real-life consequences. One ex accused the other of manipulating scenes to appear unstable. The other fired back, claiming emotional abuse had been edited out to protect the show's image. And when fans demanded proof, both sides teased receipts they never fully released. That's the worst kind of chaos, the kind where everyone claims they have evidence. But no one drops the full file. But wait, because just when viewers thought they understood the money drama, a deeper layer surfaced. Sponsorships, brand deals. Influencer income tied directly to relationship status. One couple reportedly earned more together than apart. So what happens when your breakup threatens your revenue stream? Suddenly reconciliation rumors start looking suspiciously profitable. One insider claimed they staged public arguments to keep engagement high. And if that's true, then some of the most explosive fights weren't spontaneous emotional eruptions. They were content. Let that sink in. Content. And here's the moment that truly detonated everything. A production assistant, someone who had nothing to gain and everything to lose, allegedly revealed that one infamous breakup scene was reshot. Not fully scripted, but recreated. The emotions were real. The tears were real. But the timing adjusted. The confrontation? Encouraged. That means what we believed was a spontaneous collapse may have been nudged into existence for maximum impact. And suddenly fans weren't just questioning the couple. They were questioning the entire ecosystem around them. Now pause for a second. If you've ever felt emotionally invested in one of these couples, if you've defended them in comment sections, argued with strangers online, maybe even cried watching them fall apart, how does it feel knowing parts of the chaos might have been strategically amplified? I'm not saying every breakup was fake. I'm saying the line between real and produced is thinner than we want to admit. And then came the twist that no one predicted. One of the most volatile exes quietly entered a new relationship with someone connected to the franchise. Not a cast member exactly, but close enough to ignite speculation. Fans began connecting dots. Old photos resurfaced, shared locations, familiar filming crews, and suddenly the breakup that seemed tragic started looking transitional. Was this heartbreak? Or a stepping stone? Because if a new romance overlaps the old timeline, even slightly, that changes everything. And the ex left behind? They weren't just grieving, they were blindsided publicly, but don't think they stayed silent. Oh no. They went live. And what followed was a digital explosion, accusations of emotional manipulation, claims of being used for storyline advancement, hints that cultural clashes were exaggerated for drama. At one point, they almost revealed something about a private agreement that would ruin everything and then abruptly stopped. You could see the panic flash across their face. Someone off camera whispered something. The live ended. And just like that, we were left with fragments. If you've been watching this unfold in real time, you already know the fandom split into factions overnight. Some believe the heartbreak is genuine. Others think we're watching a masterclass in reality TV performance. But here's the thing that keeps me up at night. What if both are true? What if these relationships start with authentic love, then slowly get distorted under the pressure of fame, money, and public scrutiny until no one remembers what was real anymore? And just when we thought we'd reached peak scandal, a former cast member hinted that one of the franchise's most explosive splits involved immigration leverage being weaponized during arguments. Not publicly, not on camera, but in private fights where threats were allegedly made about sponsorship withdrawal. That's not just messy, that's devastating. Because when love becomes conditional on paperwork, the power imbalance shifts in terrifying ways. Now ask yourself this: how many of these breakups were truly about incompatibility? And how many were about control? Because as more former partners start speaking out, a pattern is emerging. Intense love bombing at the beginning, rapid engagement, fast-tracked commitments, then jealousy, then financial tension, then isolation, then public humiliation. It's almost formulaic. And whether that formula is accidental or encouraged by the environment is the million-dollar question. And here's the cliffhanger you're not ready for. A rumor is circulating, quietly but persistently, that one former couple who publicly despises each other may have signed on for another project together. Not reconciliation, not romance, something else, something contractual, which means the animosity we're watching might not be over. It might just be evolving. Because in this universe, breakups don't end stories, they transform them. And if the whispers are true, the next reveal won't just expose a couple. It might expose the machine behind them. So the real question isn't who broke up. It's who benefited. And just when you think you've figured out who benefited, the ground shifts again, because here's the part nobody wants to say out loud. Sometimes the breakup isn't the end goal. Sometimes the breakup is the brand. Think about it. The couples who implode the loudest are the ones who trend. The screaming matches, the drink throwing, the walk-offs, those clips circulate for years. And once a relationship becomes iconic for its chaos, it doesn't matter whether they stay together or not. They're locked into the franchise mythology forever. Which means more spin-offs, more interviews, more paid appearances, more leverage. One former cast member allegedly confided to a friend that they felt pressured to deliver drama because calm couples fade into the background. Imagine being in a relationship where peace feels like professional failure, where working things out quietly doesn't get you renewed. That changes how you fight. That changes how you forgive. That changes everything. And here's where it gets darker. In one of the most explosive splits, the partner who appeared unhinged, the one viewers labeled unstable, reportedly begged producers not to air a specific argument. According to someone close to the situation, that fight happened during a mental health spiral. It wasn't theatrics. It wasn't strategy. It was vulnerability at its rawest. And yet, it made the cut, edited for maximum impact, stripped of context. Now ask yourself, how many villains were simply people unraveling under pressure? If you've ever watched one of these tell-alls and felt uncomfortable, not entertained, but uneasy, that instinct might have been picking up on something very real. But before you start thinking this is just about production manipulation, let's flip the lens back onto the couples themselves. Because accountability doesn't disappear just because cameras are involved. Take the breakup that seemed rooted in cultural differences. That's what we were told. Different expectations, different values, family traditions clashing. But after the split, text messages surfaced suggesting that cultural conflict was a convenient storyline. The real issue was jealousy, obsessive jealousy, tracking locations, demanding passwords, policing social interactions. Suddenly, the narrative of "we're just too different" looked suspiciously like "I need control." And the public, they had already chosen sides. That's the dangerous part of reality fame. Once viewers emotionally invest, they defend their favorite like it's personal. One explosive breakup resulted in online harassment so intense that both exes temporarily left social media. Fans weren't just commenting, they were attacking, digging into families, contacting workplaces, as if the collapse of a televised relationship gave them ownership over the aftermath. Now, here comes the twist that sent insiders into a frenzy. A private group chat allegedly leaked, screenshots circulating quietly at first, then spreading like wildfire. In those messages, one ex referred to their relationship as a stepping stone, not love, not marriage, a stepping stone. They allegedly discussed how exposure would open doors, how controversy keeps you relevant, how sympathy converts to followers. If those messages are authentic, and that's still debated, then we've been watching ambition disguised as romance. And if they're fake, then someone is willing to fabricate evidence to destroy an ex publicly. Either way, it's nuclear. And this is where I have to pause for a second. Because if you're still listening and thinking this is just messy TV drama, understand this: these are real people whose lives don't reset when the episode ends. So when we dissect these breakups, when we analyze every tear and accusation, we're participating in something bigger than entertainment. And if you want to keep unpacking this chaos with me, make sure you're locked in. Because what's coming next makes the earlier scandals look almost innocent. Now let's talk about the ex who refused to let the breakup narrative settle. Instead of fading into post-show obscurity, they started dropping hints, interviews with coded language, podcast appearances where they'd almost reveal the truth, subtle jabs implying their former partner had a secret that would change everything. And then silence. Strategic silence. Because nothing keeps attention like an unfinished sentence behind the scenes. Sources claim negotiations were happening, not about reconciliation, about image control, about who gets to speak first, about which receipts can legally be shown. When a breakup becomes a PR chess match, every move is calculated. And then, in a twist no one predicted, one of the most publicly shattered exes started thriving. New business ventures, new relationship glow, emotional stability that viewers never saw during filming. It forced fans to reevaluate everything. Were they really the unstable one? Or were they reacting to an environment that no longer exists? Sometimes distance exposes the imbalance, but don't get too comfortable. Because just as the dust began to settle, a rumor resurfaced about a private altercation that never aired. Not physical, but explosive. Allegedly, during one off-camera argument, a truth about finances was revealed. Shared accounts drained. Promises broken. Money transferred without consent. If proven true, that doesn't just change the breakup story. It changes the moral alignment of the entire relationship, and yet, no official statement has confirmed it, which leaves us here, watching fragments, connecting dots, trying to decide who's honest and who's performing. And here's the cliffhanger that's quietly brewing. Multiple former cast members have hinted that a tell-all special was heavily edited to protect someone whose behavior was worse than viewers ever saw, if unreleased. Footage exists, footage that completely reframes one of the most explosive breakups in franchise history. What happens if it leaks? Because in today's reality TV world, nothing stays buried forever. Not messages, not contracts. Not resentment, and certainly not secrets. The next reveal isn't going to be a screaming match. It's going to be proof, and when that proof surfaces, it won't just break up a couple. It might break the illusion entirely. And here's the thing about illusions. Once a single crack appears, you can't unsee it. Because after the rumors of protected edits and manipulated timelines started circulating, former cast members began getting braver, subtler at first. A like on a shady comment, a repost of a fan theory that hit a little too close to home. Then full-on interviews where the phrase "that's not how it really happened" started popping up more and more. And suddenly, the most explosive breakups in 90-day history weren't just emotional disasters. They were contested narratives. Let's talk about the breakup that fans still argue about in comment sections years later. On screen, it looked simple: trust broken, tears shed, suitcases packed. But off-screen, according to someone close to production, there was a fight so intense it halted filming for 2 days. 2 days, that's not a dramatic pause, that's crisis management. Allegedly, things were said that legal had to review, and whatever happened in that window never fully made it into the final cut. So what did we actually watch? A sanitized explosion, and that's where it gets uncomfortable again, because one ex, the one who walked away looking calm and composed, reportedly knew exactly how to perform restraint, knew the power of staying quiet while their partner spiraled on camera, knew that silence can be just as manipulative as shouting. And when the reunion aired, their controlled demeanor made the other look irrational. But insiders claimed that behind closed doors, the dynamic was very different. That the calm one knew how to push buttons privately and let the meltdown happen publicly. Now, that is a masterclass in narrative control. And if you've ever wondered why some cast members seem untouchable, while others get dragged relentlessly, you might be looking at editing, timing, and strategy colliding all at once. But wait, because we haven't even touched the betrayal that blindsided production itself. One of the most explosive breakups didn't just fracture a couple. It fractured trust between cast and crew. Allegedly, a partner confided something deeply personal to a producer, something meant to stay off the record, and later felt that it was indirectly used to build tension in the storyline. Whether intentional or not, the fallout was brutal. That cast member reportedly refused certain filming conditions afterward. And when their relationship finally detonated, the anger wasn't just toward their ex. It was toward the entire system surrounding them. Now imagine navigating heartbreak while also questioning the machine amplifying it. And just when you think this is about manipulation and money and fame, here comes the twist nobody saw coming. A former couple, one of the most toxic splits in the franchise, allegedly reconnected privately months after their very public implosion. Not for love, not even for closure, for leverage. According to whispers circulating in fan circles, they discussed collaborating on a joint tell-all project that would set the record straight. Two exes who publicly despised each other, potentially teaming up behind the scenes. Let that sink in. If true, that means some of the most vicious online attacks, some of the most dramatic accusations, were happening while conversations were still open privately. Which begs the question, was the hatred real? Or was it just the loudest storyline available? And this is the moment where everything becomes layered. Because heartbreak can be real and opportunism can be real at the same time. You can love someone and resent them. You can feel betrayed and still want mutual benefit. These aren't cartoon villains. They're flawed people navigating sudden fame with limited guidance and massive pressure. But here's where the temperature spikes. Again, one ex recently hinted during a live Q&A that there are contracts fans would never believe, plural contracts, not just standard filming agreements, something else. They didn't elaborate. They smirked. They moved on. But that single comment sent speculation into overdrive. Are there incentives tied to relationship milestones? Bonuses for weddings? Penalties for early splits? No proof confirms that, but the fact that cast members are even hinting at structural pressure changes how we interpret every explosive breakup we've watched. And if that wasn't enough chaos, a new pattern has started emerging among former cast members: timed revelations. Right before new seasons premiere, old breakups resurface. Allegations get refreshed. Subtle shade gets louder. It's almost rhythmic, which raises the possibility that even post-breakup drama is part of the ecosystem. But here's what truly unsettles me. In several of these explosive splits, the partner who seemed to lose, the one embarrassed publicly, the one accused loudly, later revealed they were financially supporting more than viewers knew. Family back home, shared bills, immigration fees. When the relationship collapsed, they weren't just heartbroken, they were destabilized. and the partner who appeared stronger walked away with the narrative advantage. That imbalance? That lingers, and just when we think we've reached the emotional ceiling, here comes the quietest, most chilling twist of all. One former cast member allegedly recorded private arguments as insurance. Not to release immediately, but to have. In case the breakup turned ugly. In case accusations started flying. That means some of these relationships were operating under mutual suspicion. Long before the cameras stopped rolling. That's not love, that's war planning. So now we're left here, staring at years of explosive breakups, wondering which ones were combustions of incompatibility, and which were carefully navigated detonations. And the most unsettling part? Several former cast members are reportedly in talks for a new project, centered entirely around untold truths, not a traditional reunion, not a couples therapy spin-off, something darker, something framed around exposing what really happens when the cameras cut. If that project moves forward, it won't just revisit old breakups. It will reopen them. And if even half of these whispers hold weight, the next wave of revelations won't just change how we see a couple. It might force us to question the entire reality we thought we were watching, because the most explosive breakup might not be between two people. It might be between cast and production. And when that finally erupts, there won't be an edit powerful enough to contain it. And here's where the story stops being about individual couples and starts feeling like a reckoning, because after years of explosive breakups, screaming tell-alls, teary Instagram lives, and suspiciously timed reconciliations, something has shifted in the atmosphere. The cast members aren't just reacting anymore. They're remembering. They're comparing notes. And when people who once thought their chaos was isolated begin realizing patterns overlap, that's when the narrative gets dangerous. Several former partners from entirely different seasons, different countries, different story arcs have quietly echoed the same phrase: it wasn't what it looked like. Not in a defensive way, not in a bitter way, but in a calculated, almost cautious tone. And when you line those statements up next to each other, it stops sounding like coincidence. Let's go back to one of the most explosive splits that had fans screaming at their screens. The betrayal seemed obvious. The anger looked justified. One partner exposed the other publicly for alleged cheating, complete with screenshots and emotional confessions. The internet exploded. Sides were chosen instantly. But months later, during a low-key podcast appearance, the accused partner hinted that the screenshots were from a period when they were already privately separated, that they had agreed to keep filming as a couple for storyline continuity. Read that again. If that's true, then what we watched as a shocking betrayal might have been a relationship already dead behind the scenes, and the partner who exposed them? They gained sympathy, followers, brand partnerships centered around empowerment and survival. Was their pain real? Possibly. Was it also strategically presented? That's the uncomfortable question, and here's where it escalates again. Because one breakup that seemed fueled by cultural incompatibility reportedly involved something far more volatile: a private ultimatum tied to relocation. According to someone familiar with the situation, one partner demanded that filming continue in a specific city for business visibility, even though the other felt isolated and miserable there. The argument wasn't just about love. It was about platform, about whose career benefited most from the setting. When relationships start negotiating geography based on exposure instead of comfort, the emotional erosion begins quietly. But the real bombshell came from someone nobody expected to speak: a relative. Not a dramatic, camera-loving family member. A quieter one. They allegedly revealed that during one of the franchise's most infamous screaming matches, the fight had actually started hours earlier over finances. By the time cameras rolled, exhaustion and resentment had already peaked. The televised argument was just the crescendo. How many of these out-of-nowhere explosions were actually the end of marathon arguments we never saw? And here's something that doesn't get discussed enough. What happens after the explosive breakup when the cameras leave? Several former cast members have admitted that the silence afterward is deafening. No crew, no structured filming schedule, no producer check-ins. Just you, your ex, and the internet dissecting your worst moments. That kind of pressure can distort memory itself. Some start questioning whether they overreacted. Others double down, rewriting history to survive the public narrative. And then comes the rebranding phase. Have you noticed how many post-breakup arcs follow the same trajectory? The villain becomes reflective. The victim becomes empowered. The chaotic partner becomes spiritual. It's almost archetypal. But here's the twist. Insiders suggest that in some cases, image consultants quietly guide that transformation. Not officially through the network, privately. Which means the breakup storyline doesn't end at the final episode. It evolves. And just when you think the drama can't possibly find a new angle, here comes the most destabilizing rumor yet. Multiple former cast members are allegedly exploring legal options not against each other, but regarding contracts tied to portrayal and editing. Not full lawsuits, not public battles, just consultations. The kind you make when you feel misrepresented in a way that affected your livelihood. If that energy builds, if even one of those consultations turns into formal action, the ripple effect would be massive. Because then the conversation shifts from messy relationship drama to structural accountability. But let's zoom back in on the couples themselves for a second, because even if production amplified tension, even if editing shaped perception, these breakups still involved real words said in real anger. And one former partner recently admitted something chilling during a late-night live session. They stayed longer than they wanted to because leaving would have meant losing everything they'd built publicly. The relationship had become their identity. Walking away felt like erasing themselves. That's not just heartbreak. That's entrapment by visibility. And now, with more cast members speaking cautiously but consistently about pressure, fans are starting to revisit old seasons with new eyes. Scenes that once felt entertaining now feel loaded. Jokes that once seemed harmless now look strategic. Explosions that felt spontaneous now appear inevitable. And here we are, years of explosive breakups layered on top of each other like dominoes. Each one messier than the last. Each one revealing just a little more about the ecosystem that breeds them. But here's the final twist. And this is the one that changes everything. A source close to an upcoming production hinted that a future installment might focus not on couples falling in love, but on couples after the breakup. No fairy tale arcs. No visa races. Just aftermath. If that happens, if former partners are given a platform to speak without the pressure of performing romance, we may finally see what these explosive splits actually cost, and that could be the most dramatic chapter yet, because the biggest scandal isn't who cheated. It isn't who lied. It isn't who used who for a green card or a brand deal. It's whether the chaos we've been consuming as entertainment has been quietly reshaping real lives in ways we're only beginning to understand. And if even one major cast member decides to fully break ranks and expose everything, contracts, reshoots, narrative nudges, private ultimatums, the explosion won't be contained to a couple. It will hit the entire franchise. So the next time a 90-day relationship detonates in front of us, ask yourself one question: are we watching a breakup? Or are we watching a system crack under the weight of its own drama? Because something is building. And when it finally surfaces in full, the most explosive breakup in 90-day history might not be between two lovers. It might be between truth and the story we were sold. And now we've reached the point where the silence feels louder than the screaming ever did. Because after all the explosive breakups, the public accusations, the leaked messages, the emotional Instagram lives, something strange has started happening. The chaos isn't as chaotic anymore. It's controlled, calculated, almost anticipatory. Like everyone involved knows another shoe is about to drop. And here's why that matters. When multiple former cast members who don't even like each other start hinting at the same underlying pressure, that's not bitterness. That's pattern recognition. One said they were encouraged to revisit sensitive topics. Another admitted they were told certain conversations were important for the arc. Important for the arc. Not important for healing. Not important for clarity. For the arc. Now imagine trying to break up with someone while also being reminded that your emotional devastation has narrative value. That changes the temperature of every argument. One of the most infamous splits in the franchise, the one fans still debate like it's a courtroom case, reportedly reached its boiling point after a private disagreement about future filming. According to someone close to the situation, one partner wanted out completely. No more cameras. No more tell-alls. The other, they weren't ready to let go of the spotlight. The breakup wasn't just emotional, it was directional. One person wanted peace. The other wanted visibility, and when those goals collide, love doesn't just fade. It combusts. But here's the twist that nobody is prepared for. A quiet reconciliation meeting allegedly happened months after one of the most toxic public splits. Not romantic. Not affectionate, strategic. The two exes reportedly met to discuss clearing their names because both felt they'd been portrayed in extremes. Think about that, to people who publicly dragged each other through the mud, realizing they may have both been distorted in opposite directions. If that's true, then some of the most brutal accusations we watched might have been fueled by defensive panic rather than pure malice. And this is where it gets even more layered. Because a former insider hinted that certain explosive confrontations were filmed multiple times from different angles with escalating emotional prompts. Not scripted lines, but nudges. Say that again, clarify what you meant, tell them how that made you feel. Now, on the surface, that sounds harmless. But when two people are already heated, when resentment is simmering, asking them to repeat painful accusations doesn't calm things down, it intensifies them. And the final take, the one that airs, becomes the definitive version of their relationship collapse. Meanwhile, off-camera apologies, reconciliations, or context rarely make it into the episode. So the public remembers the explosion, not the aftermath. And just when fans thought the cycle of dramatic breakups couldn't get more extreme, something unprecedented started happening. Cast members began refusing to engage in public mudslinging after splits. No messy lives. No exposed DMs, just statements about choosing peace. At first, it seemed mature, but then whispers surfaced that silence might be strategic. Because when everyone's holding receipts, the first person to go nuclear risks triggering mutual destruction. And this is where the tension becomes almost unbearable. There are allegedly archived texts, unaired footage, and private agreements sitting in digital vaults that could reframe entire seasons. Not minor details. Foundational ones, timelines, financial arrangements, motivations for staying together longer than emotionally healthy, and the longer those remain sealed, the more powerful they become. One former cast member recently said something chilling during a Q&A, "If I ever tell the whole truth, it won't just hurt my ex. It'll hurt the franchise." Then they smiled and moved on. That's not a throwaway comment, that's a warning. Because when breakups evolve from romantic failure into potential industry exposes, the stakes change entirely. Now let's zoom out for a second. Why are the most explosive breakups always the ones that dominate conversation? Because conflict is magnetic. It pulls viewers in. It sparks debate. It generates loyalty. But what if, just what if, the intensity of those implosions isn't accidental? What if the environment itself accelerates fractures that might have unfolded more quietly in private life? There's a psychological term for relationships under public pressure: magnification. Every insecurity grows larger. Every misunderstanding echoes louder. Every doubt becomes a storyline, and when you combine magnification with sudden fame, cultural stress, immigration pressure, financial imbalance, and family interference, you don't just get arguments, you get detonations. But here's the final, earth-shifting possibility. Several former cast members are reportedly in early talks about participating in an independent documentary, not network-affiliated, focused solely on the emotional and psychological impact of reality TV relationships. If that project moves forward, and if participants speak without narrative framing, we could see a version of these breakups that strips away the dramatic music, the reaction shots, the edited pauses. We might finally see raw truth. And if that truth contradicts what we've believed for years, the fallout won't be quiet, because then the question won't just be who cheated or who lied. It will be who benefited from the explosion. And once audiences start asking that consistently, the entire ecosystem shifts. So as we sit here dissecting the most explosive breakups in 90-day history, the betrayals, the money fights, the cultural clashes, the public humiliations, remember this: the loudest fights aren't always the full story. The calmest ex isn't always innocent. The messiest partner isn't always unstable. And the breakup that looked spontaneous might have been building under pressures we never saw. Something is coming. Maybe it's leaked footage. Maybe it's a tell-all no one can edit. Maybe it's one cast member deciding they have nothing left to lose. But when that moment arrives, when someone finally drops the unfiltered version of events, the explosion won't be contained to one couple. It will force us to rewatch everything, and when we do, we may realize the most explosive breakup wasn't between two people at all. It was between reality and the version we were told to believe. And just when you think there is nothing left to expose, that every scream has been replayed, every tear dissected, every breakup autopsied frame by frame, the final layer starts to peel back. Because here's the truth nobody is ready to sit with: some of these explosive breakups didn't end when the relationships ended. They metastasized. They shaped careers. They altered identities. They hardened people. One former cast member, who once sobbed on camera during what was labeled the most shocking split of the season, recently admitted in a closed-door panel that they barely recognized the person they were during filming. Not because the pain wasn't real, but because the pressure distorted it. They described feeling like every disagreement had to reach a climax, like every emotional beat had to escalate. Because calm doesn't trend. Let that sink in. When you're in love and fighting privately, there's room for softness. There's room for repair. But when you're in love and fighting publicly, every argument risks becoming your defining moment, and some couples never recover from that weight. Now let's talk about the breakup that still sends shockwaves through the fandom, the one that divided viewers into teams so aggressively it felt like a digital civil war. At the time, it looked black and white. One villain, one victim. But years later, both exes have quietly acknowledged something haunting. They were both drowning. Financial stress, visa deadlines, family expectations, performance pressure. And instead of turning toward each other, they turned into symbols. Symbols are powerful. But they're not human when you become a symbol, the manipulator, the gold digger, the fame-hungry one, the naive romantic. You lose the space to be complex. And once that narrative locks in, breaking up doesn't free you. It brands you, and that branding, it follows you long after the relationship ends. But here's where the story reaches its most unsettling point. Multiple former partners from entirely different seasons have reportedly compared experiences privately and noticed similar emotional arcs. Intense bonding accelerated quickly. Conflict amplified publicly. Breakup cemented dramatically. Post-breakup identity reshaped strategically. Not scripted, not fake, but accelerated. Accelerated love, accelerated conflict, accelerated destruction. An acceleration leaves bruises. 1. Ex confessed that they didn't fully process their breakup until a year after it aired. Imagine grieving in real time while strangers analyze your facial expressions. Imagine reading thousands of comments telling you who you are based on a heavily edited version of your worst days. That doesn't just end a relationship. It reshapes your sense of self. And now, years into this franchise's evolution, something feels different. The newer couples seem more aware, more guarded, more strategic about what they reveal, almost like they've studied the explosive breakups before them and taken notes. Which raises a chilling possibility. Have the most chaotic splits become cautionary tales? Or have they become blueprints? Because here's the uncomfortable truth about explosive breakups: they are unforgettable. They dominate reunion specials. They fuel spin-offs. They generate headlines. Calm love stories rarely get that legacy. So when a couple begins unraveling on screen, there's always a moment, subtle, fleeting, where you can see the fork in the road. De-escalate quietly. Or lean into the storm. And sometimes, leaning into the storm feels inevitable. But now we arrive at the final bombshell rumor, the one that could blow this entire conversation wide open. There are whispers that a former cast member has been compiling documentation for years. Not gossip, not screenshots for social media, documentation, contracts, emails, production notes, personal journals, a full archive. Not necessarily to sue, not necessarily to expose tomorrow, but to preserve what really happened if that archive ever surfaces publicly. Not filtered through edits, not condensed into a tell-all segment. It would shift the narrative from explosive breakups to systemic pressure cooker. And that's when everything changes, because up until now, we've treated these implosions like entertainment spectacles. We've debated who cheated, who lied, who manipulated, who was toxic. But if even half of the behind-the-scenes pressure is real, then the conversation expands beyond individual blame. It becomes about environment. About incentives, about what happens when love becomes content. And here's the final cliffhanger, the one that keeps insiders uneasy and fans on edge. There's reportedly an upcoming project, separate, quieter, less flashy, that centers on former cast members reflecting on what they would have done differently if cameras weren't present. Not dramatic, not chaotic, reflective. If that series moves forward and if participants speak freely, it could reframe years of explosive breakups as something far more complicated than villain versus victim storylines. It could humanize the chaos. Or it could detonate it all over again, because once people start telling their truths without music swelling in the background, without reaction shots, without edited pauses, we may discover that the most explosive breakup in 90-day history wasn't televised the way we thought. It wasn't just to people falling apart. It was trust eroding slowly under spotlight pressure. It was love trying to survive inside a system built for drama. And if the full truth ever comes out, fully, unedited, undeniable, we won't just rewatch old seasons differently. We'll question why we ever believed the explosions were that simple. So the next time a 90-day couple screams, throws rings, storms off stage, or goes live to expose receipts, ask yourself, is this the end of a relationship? Or is this just another chapter in a much bigger unraveling? Because something tells me the most explosive breakup hasn't aired yet, and when it does, it won't just shatter a couple. It will shatter the illusion completely.